Hi guys.
Hi Trudy, how's it going? A bit of a strange view for you of us.
It feels cruel to ask you to talk.
Then we've got the amazing Kristin doing the talking for us. Amazing. Thank you, Trudy, for being here.
Yeah, really.
Oh, you're really welcome. It's exciting. I'm just sad I'm not seeing you kind of trying to cycle up Table Mountain at the moment.
Yes. That would have been amazing.
Well, to be honest, I'm quite happy that it's not as hot. Yeah, so.
Are you both in South Africa at the moment? Where are you at the moment?
So we're both actually in Dublin. So
we're actually, great. Okay.
Yeah, in like next to the Livy. So we've got a good view. We've got a nice breeze to keep us cool. Yeah, we're lucky actually that it's not 30 degrees here in Ireland today, because that would have made it a completely different ballgame.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us, Trudy. We feel really privileged to be speaking to some really inspiring people that are working in the field of mental health and well-being, such as yourself.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, there's a few people that are listening on the live stream. It might be useful for them if you could just give us an introduction to who you are and what work you're doing.
Yeah, thanks, Kirsten, and thanks, guys, for giving me a chance to talk to you all today. I've got an interesting path, I think, in that I came from being a clinical psychologist, very, I guess, traditionally trained as a clinical psychologist in Dublin and Trinity College. And now I've moved into positive psychology with the Royal College of Surgeons in Dublin, and I'm with the Centre for Positive Psychology and Health there at the moment. So it's been an interesting transition. I started in Dublin. In the middle of that path, I worked for Stanford University's overseas campus in Cape Town. So I have a South African connection.
Nice.
Yes. So I've been in clinical work, education, and now in the area of well-being and positive psychology. And that's been quite an exciting path to see how all of those areas link together, and how you can't really have one without the other as well, how interlinked they are.
Yes, amazing. So yeah, I've got a question for you specifically because you are in the more academic space of psychology. I saw a quote that said, research is formalized curiosity. And I'm really interested to hear, what kind of sparked your curiosity in this field of psychology?
Oh, that's a really good question. And I have a very boring, bookish answer in that but I guess it just shows the importance of libraries and public education access for kids. I grew up in a small town. I'm still here at the moment because I'm working remotely. But there I discovered the local library, and I snuck into the adult section because they had the children's sections cordoned off. But I was curious. So I snuck into the adult section and found those books, the how-to books that have like graphics and cartoon kind of images that explain everything. And I found one on Carl Jung that explained kind of Carl Jung's teaching about psychology, and specifically some of the imagery and ideas in that. I was 12 at the time, I think. So I only picked up bits of it, but this idea of the collective unconscious, that we're all connected somehow, was really inspiring for me. And also, one of the things that Carl Jung did was he spoke about the shadow and the importance of darkness as being part of who we are. And it's not something we need to be scared of or run away from, but that we all have shadow, and that shadow can be used for creative means as well. So I think that sparked my interest as a really young kid. And for some reason, I stuck with those two notions and decided that I wanted to be a psychologist, and kind of went on a path from there, from kind of small town, digging around a library. Yeah.
Wow, amazing. So it goes to show that breaking the rules actually has some good benefits from time to time.
Exactly.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on the topic of collective consciousness, as you said. This is something that really inspires me, specifically in the space of psychology. before you joined, we were just chatting to Ian Power from Crisis Text Line, and he was saying that one of the main benefits of some of the volunteers is that the work that they do, learning how to practice empathy actually benefits them and their own day-to-day life. And I think this directly links to this topic of collective consciousness.
Yeah, it's a really powerful idea, and it's really important, I think, especially now where we're at as a society and as a whole. And it's really interesting that a lot of contemporary researchers are coming back to that. There's a positive psychologist called Barbara Fredrickson, and she has a book called Love 2.0. But her whole idea and her whole research is on human connection, and that love isn't this kind of idealized romantic notion between like one person and another single individual. That love is about connection with a group. So we can connect with a stranger in a moment of shared kind of joy, shared empathy, shared suffering, but that connection can happen all day, every day, and with anybody. And that it can have really positive effects if we can notice those moments of connection, kind of build on those, and kind of take in the feelings that we get from those moments of connection. So she's brought a lot of science to that idea of that connectivity and connection that people like Carl Jung would have talked about in the past without having the kind of the biological science and measurement tools to check in on it.
Yes,
Yeah.
amazing. I'm definitely going to look into that book straight after the end of today.
It's a really cool book.
I was wondering maybe if you could give some of the people that are listening in, a practical definition of what is positive psychology.
Yeah, thanks. That's a really good question. I think one of the nice things, or one of the easiest ways to explain it, is that in traditional psychology, we have tended to focus on suffering and distress, and taking people from -5 or -10 up to 0. So we focused on getting rid of suffering. And it's amazing. We've needed that. It's really important. I've spent most of my life doing that and training to do that. In the field of positive psychology, I guess what we're more interested in is taking people from 0 to +1, +2, +5, +10, wherever they want to go. And I think the key thing to bring in around positive psychology is that it acknowledges and links to the minus and the suffering.
Yeah.
But in positive psychology, I think we acknowledge that it's really difficult to bring somebody out of suffering to 0. There's nothing kind of appealing about 0. 0 is it's just the absence of something. It's the absence of pain and suffering. So if we want to kind of help people, even from a basic clinical perspective, to get out of the minus, I think we need to present people with options for well-being, and we need to make well-being something that's achievable, and that's on government agendas, and that's on everybody's agenda, so that as a kind of a human race, we're looking towards plus rather than 0 as our goal.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a really beautiful mission to be working towards. And I mean, why would you say that this is something that more governments and companies are starting to pay attention to? What has kind of led us to this point where these conversations are starting to be amplified?
I think we've reached a tipping point where people have realized there's been a lot of public education around mental health and treatment options, but people have realized that it's not enough. And they've started to push the boundaries. And, I certainly know for my generation, a lot of people have engaged in therapy, or they've worked with a psychiatrist for mental health issues, and they've gotten rid of their suffering or the problems that they've presented with. But there's a dissatisfaction with how we're living generally, and people are pushing for more, and people have had a glimpse into that, I think, as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, as you've explained positive psychology, it's such an incredibly beautiful thing that's being brought into the world, because it's directly impacting people's experience of life. And it's not necessarily about being in the negatives, as you said, but it's more about amplifying all that is good so that people can just experience more from their day-to-day life.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the things that we tend to do badly when we work with people clinically is we isolate individuals in a treatment room or a treatment setting, and we take people away from connection and meaning sometimes.
Yes.
And so one of the things we look at a lot in positive psychology is our connection. So we focus on relationships with other people, meaning, what matters for us, what are our values, what engages us, what gives us a sense of flow, a sense of this feels really good to do this work today, and how can we find small moments of achievement and accomplishment. And I think people want that. Martin Seligman, one of the key positive psychology people, he talked about this idea that people don't want the absence of suffering. That's not what people wake up kind of wanting in the morning. They want well-being. They want all of those things. They want positive relationships. They want engagement. They want meaning. That's what we want when we wake up. And I think just people are, as we've been increasingly isolated by the way we live, people have noticed that isolation, and I think people are calling for connection because we can feel it in our bodies, the lack of connection.
Yes.
And there's almost like a global longing for connection at the moment, and especially right now in a global pandemic. But
Yeah.
I think it's been coming for a long time.
Yeah. So one of the pillars of our last conversation with Ian Power was about education when it comes to mental health. Now, you being someone who is a lecturer in psychology, to me, you are an absolute superhero, because you are teaching other people to think about some of the hard facts and the research behind this, and then take it with them into their careers and into their lives. I wondered if you could speak into how is this inspiring you as a lecturer of psychology?
Yeah, it's really one of the big things that motivates me, and not just lecturing and teaching within the university setting. One of the things that we're doing at the Centre for Positive Psychology and Health is we have a schools project
Mhm.
where when the schools get back in September, October, we're doing outreach where we're doing education around the key ideas in positive psychology. So things like mindset. Do you have a positive mindset or a fixed mindset? How do you approach challenge? How do you approach failure?
Wow.
Um, how do you understand your emotions? What is stress and how do we think about stress? How do we manage our body when we're in distress? Things like meditation practice and those kind of things. So
Wow.
for me, education needs to go outside of the universities, and it's part of our mission at the centre to do schools outreach, but also a lot of public outreach and education. Because for me, what I've learned, especially engaging in the positive psychology field, there's actually a lot of things we can do to increase our well-being, and there's a lot of kind of hacks that exist out there that people don't know about. And
Yeah.
I feel really passionate about kind of educating people and just giving people access to this really valuable information,
Yeah.
that's so vital. There's really cool research going on at the moment in Stanford and Harvard looking at stress and how our mindset around stress. And they
Mm.
found that if people see stress as enhancing and challenging and interesting, it has less negative effects on our body and our health. Um,
Mm.
so we can change how people think about stress and perceive it. And that has a huge difference and makes a huge difference in how stress impacts on all of us. And we know it's a global issue, stress at the moment.
Yeah. I'm curious to hear. I mean, you mentioned that you guys are going to be doing some work in the schools from September onwards when schools start going back. This is something that I'm quite passionate about myself. If you're looking at the schooling model, traditionally it's been more about physical health and physical intelligence through sport and activities, and intellectual health and intellectual intelligence through some of the lessons that were learned. But the emotional intelligence piece seems to have largely been missing from the schooling system. Do you think that in the future, like my grandchildren will be going to a school where they are actually taught some of the practical pieces of emotional intelligence?
I think they have to be.
Mm.
I think we're missing, even just in terms of basic efficiency, we're missing a trick here. We can teach our brains to be more clever in terms of emotional reactivity, how we respond to emotions, how we understand emotions, and we can get so much more from our brains and our bodies if we learn how to use them well. So I think it's not efficient to not use this information, but
Yeah.
also it's really sad because it can make people feel so much better.
Yes.
So it's really important to have it as part of the basic education system, because if we can learn to understand our emotional lives, the big thing about emotions is most of the time, one of the ways to think about emotion is arousal. And we can change what that arousal means because our brains control the story. So we can change the context, we can change the story. And instead of, if we have to give a presentation for young people, if they have to speak in front of the class, they can say to themselves over and over again, I'm so nervous, this is awful, I'm going to do so badly.
Yes.
Or they can say, I'm really excited about this. And changing the context and the story actually changes the physiology of your body. And research has shown that. And the people who say I'm excited instead of I'm nervous, their performance is objectively better when rated by people who are watching them give a presentation.
Yes. I think this is such a true point. I mean, it's almost just like the difference between being reactive and responsive in a given situation, and taking ownership and responsibility for how you choose to respond. But I guess for me, that also amplifies the need for more education and awareness around mental health and emotional well-being, because in order to have the ability to respond, you kind of need to know the tools and the mindsets and what kind of techniques you can put in place to do so.
It's so important, and it's not intuitive. And I think that's one of the things I'm quite passionate about in terms of psychology taking a role in education, because a lot of this isn't intuitive.
Yeah.
And it's not just something that everybody knows. We need to get the information out there. And it's new information. A lot of the stuff we thought we knew about emotions, we're relearning it, and we're learning we have much more control over the context and the story. And especially even in terms of parenting and how we relate to our children, and in teaching, this idea, there's a really cool psychiatrist who talks about the whole brain child. And his name is Dan Siegel, but he talks about the upstairs brain and the downstairs brain. So he talks about the amygdala, where you feel all the fear and stress, and then like the prefrontal cortex, where you talk to yourself, where you pull in your logic, where you bring in planning. But that's something we have to learn, and our brain has to learn. It doesn't always learn how to do that, and most of the time we do it, with good enough care and good enough supports. But oftentimes, if we've lived through trauma or adversity, we can't do it naturally.
Yeah.
So we need to learn to get to say to ourselves, when we're freaking out, I've just flipped my lid. And we need to find out how to get the upstairs brain talking to the downstairs brain and bring it back in. And
Yeah.
there's tools for that. We can actually do that. So there's no reason for people to have flipped their lid and to be left out there in the wilderness.
Yeah.
We can bring that back, and we can talk to our downstairs brain and calm our whole bodies.
Yeah. And I guess that's why, for me, today's conversations are coming at such a crucial time, because it's not only about raising awareness and so on, but it's about telling people, hey, there actually are tools and techniques that you can put in place that can help you get out of the space that you're in.
Exactly.
And to be able to not only get out of the space, but to learn from that space too, and find some peace while you're in a given space.
Exactly. And I think it's really important why places like Crisis Text Line exist, because essentially when you reach out when you're in distress, the amygdala is freaking out, that part of your brain is in distress. But when you make that text, you're using your prefrontal cortex to say something. You're saying, hey, I need help. So you're training your brain, and you're building up emotional intelligence. You recognize distress, you're linking the prefrontal cortex, you're putting language on it, and you're making a plan with somebody else then to
Yeah.
soothe, look for avenues, kind of collaboratively problem solve. So something like Crisis Text Line actually kind of helps somebody with that rewiring and integration, and like you said, helps somebody be responsive rather
Yeah.
than reactive. So it's
Yeah.
really important.
So it's almost like taking an emotional state from the subconscious mind to the conscious mind, and then
Exactly.
actually being able to communicate it and connect it to the world around you.
Exactly. And I think it's really important why for that 24/7 access, because when we're emotionally heightened, when we don't know how to do it, we need to do it in the moment. We need to reach out in the moment, and we need to get that experience of connecting that unconscious emotion with conscious, and learning to collaboratively problem solve. And it's really hard to do that if you have to park that emotion for a week, then try and recall it when you go back to therapy. and do that integration. Then doing the integration live and in the moment is really helpful, and that's why services like Crisis Text Line, where there's a 24/7 access to support, is really important, especially for young people, because their brains are still developing. So there's so much opportunity for integration and learning. Yeah.
So just for some of the people that may be listening in from home, where would you advise people to look to for tools, resources, practical ways of getting started in this? That's not, I'm also just aware that often you might send someone an article link, and because it's quite dense and academic, they just don't read it. So
Exactly.
where can people look for these kind of resources?
There's really amazing things online. If you look for Spark tools at Stanford University, they have a whole section on stress is empowering. But one of the key things that I think is really important for people right now, because we're in a pandemic and we're socially isolated, is Barbara Fredrickson's work. And she has a website called positivityresonance.com. So positivity, POSITIVITY, resonance, RESONANCE.com. And one of the things that her website links to is meditation practices. And she has this meditation practice called loving kindness meditation. And the aim of this meditation is to link you in your mind to that connection, that loving connection, with not a romantic love, with kind of compassion for other humans that you have some kind of a heart connection with, or just a mutual, hey, we're human, we have a connection. And one of the interesting things with this kind of meditation practice and imagining a connection with somebody, imagining a connection has a positive impact on your body. So obviously it's not as effective as actually having a hug or touching somebody's hand or making eye contact in real life, but we can bring that connection into our imagination through meditation and actually start to soothe and give our body a sense of loving kindness connection. And I think we all really need that right now. So I think that would be my key go-to. And then I think just there's a really important thing. There's strengths. We need to look at our strengths, and via character strengths, VIA character strengths. If people Google that, they'll find some links. And there's a strengths assessment too, and it's for adults, and they have divided by ages, kind of adults 16 to 18 and then under 16. But it's like something you said, Kristin, in terms of education and working with young people, we need to give people an opportunity to work from their strengths.
Yeah.
And then you get a sense of accomplishment and achievement. And if we can bring our strengths into our daily lives, that really impacts our well-being. So understanding what our strengths are is really important for us as individuals.
Yeah, and use them to almost gain momentum in your life.
Yeah, definitely.
Amazing. Yeah, and I mean, something I was chatting to Ian about with the great work they're doing with Crisis Text Line and many other companies that are in the space of using information technology in a way that can foster deeper human connection. Just some other resources for people listening in. You've mentioned the benefits of meditation and how that can actually rewire your mind in this way. There's apps such as Headspace, Calm, there's many others like that. And I think it's really inspiring that we can have these in our pocket at the touch of a button. Wherever you are, you can get into that state.
Exactly. And it's really important because we're scaffolding. Meditation is difficult. It's not always easy to do it. So if you can have something in your pocket that can guide you and scaffold that, it's really helpful.
Yes. Yeah. And I think they've done a truly brilliant job of not only normalizing it, but adding a practical approach to it that anyone can use. Yeah, for
exactly.
sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. Just in terms of, what is personally inspiring you, especially during this time of the pandemic, when this conversation is probably more relevant now than ever before?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm obsessed with love at the moment. And connection. It's really inspiring me because there's such an absence of connection in terms of physical connection, but it's also been a time where people are reaching out to each other using technology in ways that we haven't before. I know there's a generation who's been very comfortable with digital technology and connecting on social media platforms. But what the pandemic has done is brought everybody else in together, and people are doing, you know, like Zoom house parties and bingo online and, you know, different kinds of connection. Like my little girl is 5 and she had a video call with her friends from creche and they had an online disco. Like, you know, like everybody just wants to connect. So at the moment, I'm passionate around how we can increase our understanding about the value of connection and really promote that and hold on to it going forward. I'm really scared that we're going to get back to normal too quickly, in terms of we'll forget everything we longed for and everything we missed. And we'll forget how much we need connection, and we'll get busy and we'll get back into our office pods and we'll forget it. So I think it's really important to hold on to connection and love and the impact that can have on our bodies. And when I say love, I mean like compassion for each other.
Yes. Wow. And I think, thank you so much for sharing that. That's definitely inspired me too over this time. And you know, as you said, because of many of the normal ways that we connect in our day to day, especially in those deeper spaces where we can share love and our truest selves, we can't do when we are isolated. But it has opened up a beautiful opportunity to be more intentional about how we use technology to do that. And as you've said, that's also something I'm hoping that we'll take out of this when isolation does start coming to an end, is that we will continue to use the devices in our pockets in a way that can foster that deeper sense of connection with ourselves, others, and the world around us.
Exactly. And I hope we do.
Yeah, I really hope we do too. I think it's an inspiring world to think about, you know, in the future.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think people are learning. People have always assumed that something like a video call isn't satisfying, or that you don't get that connection from it. And I think people are learning now that you do, and that you can have a connection, and that seeing somebody on a video call is actually really powerful and it's not actually scary at all. And I think people will continue doing it.
Yeah, no, it's very right. And it's also just the mindset that you go into and giving it the chance to be a space where deeper connection can happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Awesome. Great. Well, do you have any words of wisdom and motivation for Jim and Zach, who I see are starting to pick up revs and sweat there?
I do. Just remember, everything you're feeling is a physiological event that is arousal, and you have the power to define what that feeling means for you. So if it feels like pain, maybe you can restore it.
Yeah. You turn it into motivation. That's a good point.
That is exactly what we needed right now. I'm gonna reframe it.
So seriously, like, stop hanging your heads down. You're going to tell your body it's exhausted. You're just confirming that pain reality. You need to hold your heads up high. You need to smile. You need to say like really positive affirmations. You need to connect with all those people who are tuning in here and connecting with you. Connect with your mission and your meaning, and almost like see those legs as like walking out to meet people.
That is
I don't know if that helps.
I love that.
I just went from 160 watts to 240 watts just by that sentence. So I'm going to keep up straight. I'm going to try to. Thanks so much.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you need to do those. Do your power poses. That's what. Yeah, exactly. We need lots of this. Tell your body it's powerful and it's strong.
Come on, you can do it. No,
you can do it.
All jokes aside, thank you so much. And also,
thanings very much, guys.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us, Trudy. I think that what you just said is such a key snippet, and Zach and Jim, I think it's going to be an important part of your mindset throughout the rest of the day.
Really.
We should have maybe gotten you to dial in 6 hours time from now. I think they might need to hear a bit more of that.
Put on The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan documentary. He's really good at pushing through and using his psychology to push through pain and win. So you can use some of those tips. Take care. Take care.
Thanks so much, Trudy. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
I felt really privileged to chat with you today.
Thanks very much, Kirsten. It was great talking to you. Bye, guys. Good luck.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.